Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield, your trusted source for analysis. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. There was a lot of name calling in the House of Commons, which I don't believe is necessary. It's not a skill that doesn't require any skill to call people names or to use profanity. It's a lack of an ability to communicate, as a matter of fact, or at least a lack of an ability to control your emotions. Now, the Liberal Party was upset. I imagine Chrystia Freeland's ego is just too bruised that she's taking so much of the flack for the way that Justin Trudeau cast her aside in favor of Mark Carney. And of course, there's a whole host of issues around Mark Carney not being vetted for his conflict of interests. But that wasn't part of the dialogue. What the dialogue was, from the Conservatives it was, but from the Liberals, the dialogue was all, you're a big meanie and you're a big, name calling and innuendo and dodge, weave, avoid. And before I get into it, I would encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with all of your socials. Every time you give it a thumbs up, every time you make a comment, you basically show the algorithm that other people might be interested in watching it, and you also tell the Liberal Party that you don't agree with censorship in any way, shape, or form. Before I get too far into it, let me just say from the outset, as many of you know, I avoid using profanity on this channel. And that's not because I have an aversion to profanity. I assure you that the opposite is true. I'm quite proficient with it. However, when you think about the times when you're most shocked about hearing profanity, it's when it comes out of the mouth of a child, whether you're in the living room or whether they're on a playground. And the point that I'm trying to make is that name calling and profanity can be done with a child who can't articulate themselves, like a child who doesn't necessarily reason or rationale, a child who might have a vocabulary of 3,000 words is still able to swear and name call. So there's nothing impressive about it. And the idea that it would occur in the highest halls of the Canadian government is a mark on those that are using it, a strike against them, not a strike for them. And these coddled individuals who want to run around pretending like they are being cute or clever by utilizing name calling are simply not seeing the reality of it. And the reality of it is even a child can do it. So how can you tell yourself that there's any real merit in it? Okay, having said all that, we'll get to where Chrystia Freeland was so distraught and so bent out of shape that she had to start calling and ridiculing and demeaning the Conservatives, not for anything that they said, just in general, right? Because she, for all of the Liberal claims that they're going to work with everybody in the House, they refuse to work with anybody who doesn't agree with them.
But the Conservatives don't want to talk about it. They are so weak and spiteful. But these weak and spiteful Conservatives, I think anybody listening to Question Period today, or frankly any day, imagines that the Liberals are teaming up with the Conservatives. They are the party of privilege and austerity. We are the party of people. And Mr. Speaker, I've stood up to Trump, and I have stood up to Putin.
See, now, after calling everybody on the Conservative side name and she couldn't derail their message, she started to say how tough she is, right? And when you have to start calling on that kind of thing, you know darn well that you're not tough at all. All they want to do is not talk about Mark Carney. All they want to do is not talk about that decision by the Prime Minister to bring in someone who's not elected to look after the finances of this country without ever disclosing his conflicts of interest. Don't worry, though. They had a new plan. They have another trick. So I'll let you listen to this lady. And man, is this ever an articulated statement?
It is a bit rich to hear the member of the Conservative Party pretend to care about feminism when their own leader was using misogynistic hashtags on their videos to attract men who hate women. Mr. Speaker, it was anything but feminist when they bring forward backdoor legislation to ban abortion and to take away women's right to choose their own rights, Mr. Speaker.
Great. So we're back to this. So the country's in the worst state it's ever been in. Inflation is through the roof, despite what the Statistics Canada is trying to tell you. Housing is the most expensive on earth because all they want to do is distract. They want to distract from the fact that they gave a non-elected individual access to all of our banking information. What happens next? Does Mark Carney decide that your bank account gets frozen and you're not allowed to have any car insurance? Don't worry, though. I saved the best for last. So I'm just going to let these two talk. I want you to pay attention to how Chrystia Freeland is criticizing who the Conservatives take their advice from. And then I want you to watch her agreeing with Karina, I can't stop staring at myself, Gould, when she answers next.
The Conservative leader gets his advice on helping Canadians with their grocery bills from a Loblaws lobbyist. He gets his advice on Ukraine from Elon Musk and from Tucker Carlson. And he has courted the support of misogynists and cozied up to the far right. Those are the advisors Canadians should be really concerned about.
Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely shameful what the Conservatives are doing. When there is a Canadian who doesn't agree with their vision for Canada, what do? Attack them. Whether it's anybody who doesn't agree with what the Conservatives do, the only thing they know how to do is denigrate that person. Mr. Speaker, we should be able to disagree without being disagreeable. We should be able to hear advice from a whole wide range of actors without attacking their character and bringing down fellow Canadians. They should be ashamed of their actions.
So this woman stood up and basically just told you exactly what the Liberals have been doing all day. Right? They denigrate people who don't agree with them. They're attacking them for their actions. I mean, she literally stood up in the very next. Chrystia Freeland said, the far right, these are the people that you should be worried about taking advice from. Because remember, the subject was Mark Carney. All of that was a response to the questions about Mark Carney. All of the name calling, the misogyny cracks, all of that was somehow answering the question about Mark Carney in the mind of the Liberal individual. Then the House leader stood up. So Chrystia Freeland sat down. The Conservative member said something, and Karina Gould stood up and said, how dare they question who we get our advice from? We should be allowed to get our advice from anybody without being called names. At best, this is a person, an individual with a 100% lack of awareness. Or at worst, this is a person who's gaslighting you and intentionally trying to deflect onto somebody else before people see right through them. Because Freeland just said that the Conservatives get their advice from Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk, which is a bizarre one, the Elon Musk crack, based on the idea that he is really good with money and he also is electric car designer. And I thought the Liberals were all about fixing the finances and having electric cars. Seems weird. But he doesn't agree with the policies of the far left. So now all of a sudden, despite all of those qualifications, somehow it's a bad person to get advice from. Mark Carney, on the other hand, a guy who spends his whole time in the shadows, who believes in the carbon tax, who doesn't want to change any of the policies that the Liberals have been doing. He's just simply looking for a way to squeeze more out of it. Well, no. You can't question if you say anything. Oh my gosh, how dare you denigrate us? The lack of situational awareness. I mean, the whole time she was talking, Chrystia Freeland was sitting beside her, bobbing her head. You just said a minute ago that the people who they take advice from is somebody that you should be able to approve. But when it's shoes on the other foot, it's a different story. Now, I want you to imagine what it would be like if you were one of the constituents that voted for these people. Just imagine that you were a male trying to question her economic policy. She'd have you thrown out of the building because they're not willing to talk about their policies. They're not willing to accept that they did something wrong because they want all of the privilege and the prestige that goes along with the job, but they don't want any of the responsibility that goes along with the job. And when you're a leader, when you want to lead people, you have to be the one that takes responsibility for your own actions. You're the one who's in charge. So obviously you're the one that's responsible. I don't see any of that responsibility coming out of the Liberal Party. All I see is a deflection, a constant deflection. And that deflection, don't forget, they think that they're being clever by not answering the question, right? They don't say to themselves, imagine how people must perceive this. No, they say, look at me. I'm so clever because I didn't answer the question that was asked to me directly. I was able to dodge and weave and never once answer the question. I have distracted them to the point where they don't even want to talk to me about the question that they had, that they framed to come directly straight out of their mouth. This is something they take pride in. And then they wonder, they really wonder. They sit around and say, why doesn't anybody like me? It's the strangest sort of contradictions that a person could ever grasp. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you all for listening. I'll talk to you next time.